Hello, and welcome back to more Films That Are Constant Critique, where we take a look at films, some good, some bad, and some downright awful. I'm Bongo Baikov, joined by our host Maverick, Dren, Zaria. This week, we're taking a look at the films The Fly and The Fly.
Yeah. I'm gonna be honest though, I kind of wish we were still reviewing James Bond stuff.
I have actually kind of felt that the past few days. I'm like, I'm really in the mood to watch the next few Bond movies.
Should we slot them in before the next movie we were planning on doing, or should we just wait?
I think we should keep our original order. We'll do the next movie and then we'll get back to Bond.
The next movie.
Just so...
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I guess, yeah, that would be funnier just because of how random... What a random selection that next one was. I'll talk about that a little more later. Okay, so... this is interesting. So usually when we do these two movies enter things, I know ahead of time who will probably win, or at least I have my preferred choice. Here, I actually think both of these are pretty good, and I'm not sure who will prevail, but we'll see.
I was definitely in kind of a similar spot. Like, I watched the first movie, the 1958 one, and I went, oh, I don't know which one I'm going to like more.
Mm-hmm. You didn't watch these while eating, did you?
No. In fact, I watched the second one, the 80s one, before dinner yesterday, and I went, I'm not very hungry anymore.
I was gonna say, if you, watched it while eating dinner, right before, I'm very sorry, because that... Jeez. You probably say that about most Cronenberg movies, though. There's not really dinner movies. Okay, you can do the other intro now.
When two movies get to fighting, it happens here, and it finishes here. Two movies enter, one movie leaves. And right now, I got two movies. Two movies with a gut full of fear. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, dying times here.
In one corner, we have the movie that made people afraid to go back into their matter transporters, The Fly from 1958. And in the other corner, we have Jeff Goldblum as a mad scientist. Or is that just Jeff Goldblum in his free time? The Fly from 1986. Okay, so our first category, we have tagline, poster, marketing. And I like some of the posters for the 50s one, actually. I'm going to pull a few of these up.
See, I'm only familiar with the famous one.
Yeah, the one that looks like Psycho.
Yes.
That one just kind of looks like Psycho. Where it's just... she's screaming and you don't really see a fly anywhere. And the tagline is, once it was human, even as you and I. The monster created by atoms gone wild. That's so goofy. And so 50s. Oh, and there's a little note below that. For your own good, we urge you not to see it alone. And then some of the other posters, it makes it look like there's a giant fly attacking her.
Oh, so kind of like them, almost? Yeah.
She had to kill the thing her husband had become, but could she?
That's a better tagline than some of the other ones.
And then there was another one. If she looked up at the horror her husband had become, she would scream for the rest of her life.
That's really wordy. These are all really wordy.
It was the 50s, though.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, they get the point across, I think. There was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
fly, or a person that turned into a fly. The trailer of it, which I watched like 20 minutes before we met on here,
Hmm.
it doesn't show that many clips from the movie. Most of it is Vincent Price narrating. And you know what? Fair enough. If you're gonna have somebody narrate your trailer,
Might
Vincent
as well be Vincent Price.
Vincent Price is perfect for that job. And then the poster for the 80s one. It's a pretty famous poster, actually.
Yeah, yeah.
It looks a lot like Alien.
Especially with like the font, and it almost looks like the teleporter pod. Almost looks like the egg.
Yeah, and like the green glow
Yeah,
coming out of it.
and you can see one fly leg and one of his arms coming out.
And that tagline is very, very famous.
Yeah, yeah.
Which is be afraid, be very afraid. And that's a line that Gina Davis says in the movie. And that's a phrase that's like been referenced so many times. I'll bet most people forget that it came from this movie. So, and the trailer, it's a pretty typical trailer. I mean, it's clips from the movie. They include the "Be afraid, be very afraid" line in there.
Oh, of course, of course.
You don't see too many clips of Jeff Goldblum as the Fly. Just like
I imagine they don't want to spoil that because that is like half the reason to go see this.
they show like the early stages and then like brief glimpses of some of the later ones. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know who wins here.
I think I have to go with the '80s one, just because that tagline is so good.
True, yeah. Posters for the 50s one though are pretty fun, to be fair.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of hard to judge the trailers against each other just because they came out in completely different time periods. So
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the 50s one, like they don't really show the Fly in it at all. Like they really wanted to keep it a secret there. Afraid, be very afraid. So yeah, that is a better tagline. It's a little
Yeah.
more simple to the point.
Although I will admit, like the poster for the '80s one, it looks good, but it looks too much like it's trying to copy Alien.
It is too much like Alien. That is a good point. Yeah. I don't know.
I think I'd still go with the '80s one.
You're going with it. I'm kind of on the fence, but I can see where you're coming from. Just to move things along, I think I'll just go with it. Okay, so are you keeping track of the points or
Yep. Yep, I'm keeping track.
Okay, so box office / profit. I didn't calculate the profit on this. If you wanted to do that,
Yeah, let me pull up good old Microsoft Excel over
the
here.
1958 movie cost about $4,000 and made about $2 million. And the 1986 movie cost about $12 million and made about $60.6 million. So they both did pretty well.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
I think the 50s one was one of the most successful movies of the year it came out, if I remember right. I don't know about the 80s one. It would have had some stiff competition just because of, like, again, aliens. Oh yeah, it didn't even make the top 10, yeah. Barely though. It barely didn't make the top 10.
Here, let me finish calculating. So what are we saying the budget is on the 80s one?
12
So
million.
that's got a bit of a range on it.
12 million. I kind of just did a average of the...
Yeah.
And something worth pointing out, both of these movies made enough to get sequels.
Which is pretty impressive.
The 1958 one had 2 sequels, Return of the Fly and Curse of the Fly. Curse of the Fly apparently doesn't even have flies in it. It's just about the matter transporter, which is stupid.
Yeah, especially if we're gonna keep the name, the Fly name. I feel like it needs to be.
Return of the Fly, Vincent Price came back for Return of the Fly, which is nice. It's not a very good movie, though. And then the 1986 one had a sequel called The Fly 2.
I've heard a little bit about The Fly too, not much.
I'm surprised The Fly 2 wasn't called Son of the Fly. Because it's about Seth Brundle's son, and he's turning into a fly. Yeah, anyway. And apparently they're thinking of making another one.
Oh. It's an interesting time to do a reboot.
I wonder, is the next one going to have a more scientifically accurate Jeff Goldblum in it? Or... and we could do, if you want, we could do some of these at some point.
I would be interested in at least doing The Fly 2 at some point. Just to see how that turns out.
That one would be the more interesting one of those 3.
Yeah. Anyway.
The profits on these, what did you end up with?
So, the 50s one made a profit of $2.5 million, which means that it made about 6 times its budget back. Whereas the 80s one, it made $48.6 million back, so a pretty large return. And so it made 5 times its budget.
Oh, so that means the 50s one made more of a profit.
It made more of a profit percentage-wise.
Yeah. Does that mean we have to split this category then? Or since one of them made... Because 60 million is more than 2 million.
Yeah, by a pretty considerable margin.
So you could give one of them, like... We can give them both half a point?
We could. I don't know. Let me adjust this for inflation real quick. Well, the percentage is gonna stay the same, but
adjusted for, yeah, that's a good idea. That's a huge gap in years, though. Like, I imagine.
So we'll compare the budgets for when it came out.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Or the box office, you mean, not budgets.
Yeah, the box office.
$4,000 in 1950s money versus $4,000 in 80s.
So if it was reported in 1986 dollars, the original The Fly would have brought in $11,348,000.
Oh, huh. So the 80s one wins then in that case. If we're going off of that, are we going off of that?
I think we probably should.
That would be more fair, yeah.
Yeah. All right, another point for Cronenberg's.
Cast/characters. Okay, now we're actually...
Now this one's...
have a little more to talk about. Okay, the cast from the 50s one, we have Al Hedison, also known as David Hedison, and we literally just had him in the podcast right before this.
Oh, that's right. He was Felix Leiter.
He's Felix Leiter in Live and Let Die. I didn't do this on purpose. When I selected that, I did not do that on purpose. And he also played Felix Leiter in License to Kill. He played Jor-El in a direct-to-video movie called Superman and the Secret Planet. I have no idea what that is.
Huh.
And apparently one of his daughters married Jodie Foster. I didn't know that until reading his Wikipedia page. I thought that was interesting. Vincent Price. I was really excited to see him.
Oh, yeah, no. Having him on?
I love Vincent Price so much. I mean, most people would probably know him because he does that voiceover in Thriller, and it ends with one of the best laughs I've ever heard.
He was also in House on Haunted Hill, which just has fantastic ending.
Yeah, that's a classic right there. The Tingler. The Tingler would be a fun one to do. Laura and House of Wax, just to name a few of his movies. He's been in a lot of movies. Most of them are horror movies, but there's a lot of other stuff as well. He's even in Edward Scissorhands.
Oh, really?
I think that was like one of his last movies, was Edward Scissorhands.
Huh.
Betty Lou Gerson, she plays the nurse in this, and she also did the voice of Cruella de Vil in the original 101 Dalmatians.
Huh.
I was like reading through the trivia, I'm like, are you serious? Yeah. This is only like one scene though, but it's kind of funny. Yeah. And also the nun from the Blues Brothers is in this.
Wait, hold on. Is she like the
I think she's the one that's like whacking
maid?
them. She's the one's like whacking them at the beginning of the movie.
Oh,
Blues Brothers.
Oh no, I'm talking about in this movie. Does she play the like their maid in this movie?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. That's funny. I didn't know that was her.
Yeah, I mean it's like an over 20-year gap between movies. So.
Yeah.
Okay, so but talking about the cast of characters in the 50s one, I would say the acting in the 58 one is decent.
Yeah, Vincent Price is pretty great. Most characters are pretty great. I feel like David Hedison kind of falls flat at points.
There is one scene where his delivery was a bit flat, and when they're in the garden.
Yeah.
The reason why is because that scene was 80-yard. Because of all the noise. Because of all the noises outside. And David Hedison admitted he hated dubbing and didn't put any effort into it. Because he didn't want to miss his plane.
I was wondering, because it just sounded like bad in that scene.
But when he's like playing the fly and you like can't see his face, it's actually pretty impressive, his physical acting.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, you don't see his face or hear his voice for like the last half of the movie, but you can like really tell like the toll that the experiment took on him. Like whenever he has to like type or write something on the chalkboard, you can just tell he's like losing it.
Yeah. And like even something simple, like for a while he communicates by just knocking on the desk in front of him. I think it's once for yes, twice for no. And you can tell just by how much force he's putting into it, like how he's feeling in that moment. Like when he's angry, it's like really hard and fast. But when he's like kind of like sad and like, starting to kind of lose it on the inside, it's like really sort of like soft. It's impressive how much he's able to get across while having this massive helmet on, pretty much.
Yeah. But yeah, I will agree with you, though. There are a few parts where his line deliveries are a bit... Yeah. And the other cast members I think are good is Vincent Price, obviously. Although he's... Okay, the movie's supposed to be set in Canada. Vincent Price is very much not Canadian.
No. Because, like, everyone has, like, French names, but everyone's, like, speaking English. Some people try and, like, have an accent. Some people have an accent. Some people don't. Vincent Price just sounds like Vincent Price.
But yeah, I was noticing that because they all have like French sounding it. Andre, Helena, Francois. It was so weird. Really, a lot of the movie, like Patricia Owens, she has to carry quite a lot of the movie on her own for a while, and I think she did a good job.
Yeah, she definitely carries most of the emotional weight. It really feels like she's starting to go insane when she's trying to hunt down the housefly with a white head.
Yeah, and there's that. She has a really iconic scream as well.
Yeah.
When that happened again, it kind of made me think of Psycho. Some of the screams in Psycho. And apparently she had a fear of insects, and the director used this to his advantage.
Of course.
He didn't allow her to see the fly head until they actually filmed the scene. So her reaction was like genuine, apparently.
Yeah, that would be bad.
And Vincent Price. I mean, do we need to say anything else about Vincent Price? It's like, although he's absent for a lot of the movie, because a lot of the movie's flashback.
Yeah, because the most of the movie is told during a flashback. Yeah, so we don't get too much of him, but
one fact I thought was fun is so the part at the end with when they're looking at that spider web, you know the scene. Hell, a lot of people probably know the scene. Apparently, Vincent Price and the other actor they had to do that take multiple times because they couldn't stop laughing during that part. But it doesn't come across when you're watching the movie. They seem pretty concerned, so yeah, I credit the actors there. Another thing I had written down, that David Hedison, his voice, it makes him sound like a radio announcer.
It kind of does.
But I guess if you're talking about like the characters, because I guess I was more talking about the cast.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I mean, Patricia Owens is the concerned wife. David Hedison
is the mad scientist turned into a fly.
Yeah, he's a well-meaning guy that he spends a bit too much time in the laboratory. So like,
yeah,
they're not like super fleshed out characters, but you do still sympathize with them.
Yeah.
I think it's just the actors, they were able to elevate the material,
Even the characters that aren't in there for very long, like Vincent Price or Herbert Marshall, who plays like this police inspector. When they do get like their share of like emotional scenes, and you do really feel for these characters, even though you only see them for like 20-25 minutes out of the whole movie, if that.
It's good enough for like a 50s movie, basically, like a 50s B movie. And do we want to talk about the 80s one now, or did you have anything else to say about?
Yeah, we can talk about the 80s one.
So the cast for the 80s one it mainly just hinges on one guy, and that is Jeff Goldblum.
Yes.
Is this his first time on the podcast?
I think it is. I went back through his stuff earlier today because I was trying to think about it. I was like, I think this is the first thing we've done with him.
We haven't done Jurassic Park yet.
Nope.
What else would be like?
We haven't done Independence Day.
Right, yeah, those are probably the two big ones that we're missing.
I know at one point we mentioned doing Prince of Egypt. He's in that.
Oh, right, he plays Aaron.
I think he plays Aaron.
Right, yeah. I'm glad it's this one, though, because he gets, of those movies, this is one where he gets the most to do.
Yeah. And he definitely uses his screen time well.
This is like his big break, too, if I remember. This is like the movie that got him, like, where he started getting recognition as an actor. There were people that like thought he was like snubbed for an Oscar nomination for this movie. Actually, they thought he was that good in the movie. Gina Davis, which, I really like her in Long Kiss Goodnight. If you want another Christmas action movie, there you go.
How could you forget her work on the Stuart Little movies?
She's in Stuart Little, yeah. Which, if you want another reason to watch Long Kiss Goodnight, Sam Jackson is in it.
Oh.
And it's Sam Jackson's favorite.
We haven't had him on recently.
It's Sam Jackson's favorite
really?
of his own movies, too. So. We also have John Getz. Getz? I don't know how to pronounce it.
I think it's Getz.
He's from Iowa, actually.
Oh, really? Do you know where from Iowa?
Davenport.
Oh, so he's not too far from me then.
He went to the University of Iowa.
Huh.
So you might have seen him there then. In that case.
Just right in my neighborhood, and I didn't even know about it.
I don't remember what else he's in, honestly. I feel like there was like one other movie I saw. Oh, he's also in The Fly too. We should mention that. He's like, I think he's the only cast member that came back for The Fly too. Born on the 4th of July.
Oh, he was in Superhero Movie.
Oh, God. Oh, that might have been what... Yeah, he's in Zodiac. That might have been the other thing.
Oh, he's supposed to... I think he's supposed to be the guy that, like the J. Jonah Jameson character that's in it for 5 seconds who gets drugged off to the asylum.
Based on his performance in this, I could see him playing Jameson, actually. He's no J.K. Simmons, but I could see him playing J. Jonah Jameson. But okay.
Let me see if I can grab the clip of that.
I'll probably look at it later. But yeah. So, talking about the cast and the characters. For one, Jeff Goldblum is perfect casting for this role.
He is phenomenal in this.
I mean, he's basically just...
He starts off...
He's his same eccentric self. You know, he's just one of those guys that was just born to play a weird scientist that hardly leaves his laboratory. I mean...
Because he starts off with, like, the nerdy scientist character that he plays, it feels like, in just about every one of his movies when he was starting out. I
feel like half the roles he gets cast in, somebody said, we need a tall, awkward dude that's kind of like Jeff Goldblum, and then they just end up actually getting Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah. And throughout the movie, he kind of devolves into this monster, and just, though, his, like, shift to that is so good.
Yeah. Because you just see him slowly just losing his mind, basically. Because what's different between this and the 50s flying, we'll probably talk about this more, is that instead of him just becoming a fly immediately, it's like a slow process that happens.
Yeah, like he slowly starts to sprout like fly hairs. He starts to be able to walk up walls and on the ceiling. He starts making twitchy movements, and then finally, like, his flesh starts rotting off.
Really good acting from him.
It is.
I mean, it's just like, as if Jeff Goldblum wasn't already a weird guy. He just turns into a fly, and then...
They didn't even need makeup for it. He just did that on his own.
He was method acting to actually become a fly. Oh, jeez.
That's why they didn't ask him back for the sequel. It scared him too much.
Yeah. Another thing about him in this, and also something he's great at in Jurassic Park, is just whenever he's talking about, like, complicated scientific concepts, there's just something about him that's, like, really engaging. And you just want to listen to it. Like
he has, like, this rhythm when he ever delivers, like, nerdy lines like that.
It's enough that you like, want Jeff Goldblum to be your science teacher. I mean, just, like...
Yeah.
He should have his, like, own show, just, like... Wait, doesn't he have his own show or something? Talking about, like... Anyway, I haven't seen it, but...
I think he does. I think you're right.
Like, he has his own, like, Bill Nye show or something. um, yeah, he's definitely the standout of the cast here. Because it's not a huge cast of characters. Really, it's like, you have three main characters. Because you have him, you have Gina Davis, and then there's John Getz. Well, I guess he's more of a supporting character, but like the two main, basically the main draw of this one is the chemistry between Jeff Goldblum and Gina Davis.
Yeah. And it's a good thing that they have really good chemistry, because most of the movie is just those two talking together.
They do have really good chemistry. I think they were like dating at the time, so that's probably why.
That would make sense. Yeah.
So there's also a little more character development in this one.
Yeah.
Than in the 50s one. And there's like some conflict at first because Gina Davis is a journalist and he just explained to her all of his like contraptions and stuff, so he's like, uh-oh.
He's trying desperately to get her to not publish all the details,
and then they end up just like slowly getting into a relationship, and things start to go downhill after some kooky inventions drive Jeff crazy. I mean, you do feel really bad for them by the end of the movie, because it's just like...
You do.
God, I mean... Damn. We'll talk about that more later, probably, but...
Yeah.
And then there's...
Gina Davis...
Sorry. Yeah, Gina Davis.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
She does a fantastic job throughout this as well, because you can tell that she is like absolutely disgusted and horrified by what Jeff Goldblum is becoming, but she is still just so like heartbroken and distraught and wants to be there for him and wants to help him however she can. It really is heartbreaking to watch at points.
Yeah. And you feel just as like uncomfortable as they are during some scenes.
Yeah.
I guess she's kind of the audience surrogate in some ways, where she's like reacting how the people watching it are reacting, And then there's also John Getz.
He is a very interesting character, because he starts off as so he's like the editor for the paper that Gina Davis works for, because he starts off as like just kind of your asshole reporter character, but he kind of goes through his own redemption arc by the end of the movie.
It was a really interesting twist, because he starts off just being this creepy asshole towards Gina Davis, like at the beginning.
And you expect that he's going to become some kind of like villain. And he ends up becoming more of a hero.
Yeah, he ends up kind of becoming the hero at the end, because he's helping like fight off, the Fly, so he basically saves Gina Davis at the end of the movie.
And he is there for Gina throughout the film once she starts to break down and once he learns what Jeff Goldblum is becoming. It's very interesting.
His reaction when he's watching that video of Jeff Goldblum like eating, and like it's just, he looks so disgusted. It's perfectly played. It's great.
And then we'll definitely talk about this scene more, but at the end when he's getting attacked, he looks like equally just like horrified and stupefied at what's happening.
Yeah. Oh, did I mention he has a nice beard?
Oh yeah.
He does have a nice beard. But yeah, it's so weird. Yeah, he starts off where you're just like, he's just some 80s douchebag, and then no, he actually ends up helping them at the end. That's interesting. I'm actually split on this one, because
I am too.
On one hand, you have Vincent Price. And then on the other hand, you have Jeff Goldblum.
Jeff Goldblum. It is hard to choose between those two.
But I might. I had to think about it. I think I'm gonna give it to the '80s one though, because Jeff Goldblum has more to do in it than Vincent
Yeah.
Price, so it has that advantage.
I think that's fair.
It has a smaller cast of characters, though.
It has a smaller cast, and I feel like it manages them better because the first movie didn't have a whole lot of characters either. But even then, there were some who just had like not a lot to do. So I feel like the '80s movie just managed them a bit better.
Okay, so I think we'll give it to the '80s one then.
Yep.
But they both have their own, advantages, I think. Oh, the next one's gonna be interesting. We're talking about directing.
Ooh.
The 1958 one was directed by Kurt Newman. Have you heard of this guy?
I'm trying to think.
Didn't think so. Okay, so he he also directed Tarzan and the Amazons.
Okay.
Tarzan and the Leopard Woman.
I'm noticing a theme.
Tarzan and the Huntress.
I'm still noticing a theme.
Rocket Ship XM.
Okay.
Which was on Mr. Science Theater.
Oh.
And Kronos. Which, if you want a 50s B movie, Kronos, there's a good one to check out. It's like this alien robot that, like, tries sucking all the energy off of the Earth.
That sounds wonderful.
It's interesting. And then he also did the Fly. 1958, and this is one of his last movies because he died not long after it was released. So rest in peace. So the 1958 movie, it feels like a 50s movie.
Yeah. The shots are they're engaging, but they're pretty still. It's nothing like that's trying to like break new ground or be too creative with it.
And the acting and staging are very serious.
Yep.
There's some good lighting, especially with like the machine, I think.
Yep.
I like the look of like the
And
basement.
I will say, I wasn't expecting this movie to be in color. And I think it looks pretty good for the most part.
When I first saw it, I wasn't expecting that either, actually. For some reason, I thought it was a black and white movie.
Yeah. So I think it's partially just because this is going to sound like a really weird explanation for why.
It's an old
but kind
movie.
of the first... Yeah. Well, there's that, but also because I had seen Monsters vs. Aliens when I was a kid. And they have a character that's supposed to be almost like... sort of a reference to The Fly, where he's instead like a cockroach.
Yeah,
guy
the Dr.
that got
Cockroach.
I think so. And so I think I just assumed, because all the flashback scenes were in black and white and that this movie was gonna be in black and white.
I think that character was played by Hugh Laurie, if I remember right.
I think you're right. Yeah,
that's right. But, like, I mean, it came out in the 50s, so you're kind of like...
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of half and half sometimes, because, I mean...
And like, if you Google it, half the photos from the movie are shown in black and white.
Forbidden Planet was before this, and that was in color, and War of the Worlds was in color, but a lot of 50s B movies are in black and white, so, it's kind of a reasonable assumption. And the movie, it very easily could have slipped too much into melodrama.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. It never feels too melodramatic. And maybe we'll talk about that more under, like, tone, but, But basically, it's a 50s movie. The style it's not the flashiest movie, you know.
No.
The 1986 one was directed by David Cronenberg. Has anybody heard of him before?
Never.
He's got quite a list of directing credits. The Dead Zone, that's another one. Video.
He did both Crimes of the Future.
Yeah, Naked Lunch is another one. He's actually like really diversified his filmography in like later years, because you look at his early stuff, it's like almost all horror movies. But then later he's doing like A Dangerous Method, which is a movie about Freud and Jung, and you have History of Violence, you know, which are good movies, but it's just coming from the same guy. Coming from the same guy that did like Dead Ringers and stuff like that. I'm a little surprised it's because this is your first David Cronenberg movie, right?
It is.
I'm a little surprised it's taking you this long to see one of them.
I am too, especially after watching this, because I absolutely love this style.
Yeah, and I think this is a good one to start with. Because I feel like a lot of people did start with this one, actually, because this is one of his more famous movies, you know.
I feel like the two that I always hear about are The Fly and Scanners.
Scanners, right. Scanners you really only hear about because of that one scene, though.
True.
Exploding head or whatever. Oh, another thing worth pointing out, Mel Brooks was a producer on this.
Oh, really?
But he was, because the credits, it starts and says Brooks Films.
Oh.
His name, though, he went uncredited because he didn't want people thinking it was a spoof, you know.
Comedy, yeah. That makes sense. He did the same thing for Elephant Man, right?
Yes, yeah. Because if you see, like, Mel Brooks is the Elephant Man or Mel Brooks is the Fly, that sounds like...
It sounds like it's going to be making fun of B movies.
Exactly, yeah. And he's also the one that came up with the line, "Be afraid. Be very afraid."
Oh.
Which is interesting. But yeah, so the 80s Fly, as far as directing goes, he definitely gets a lot out of his actors, for sure.
Yes. Especially Jeff Goldblum.
There's really only like 3 characters, but it feels like you still get quite a lot of story out of those 3, though.
Yeah.
And their performances, they play off each other very well. That's very important for a director to, match the energy of the actors. And, like, the setting.
And I guess it doesn't...
Cronenberg's movies tend to have, like... It's maybe not quite as overt as, say, a John Carpenter movie, but his movies do tend to have, like, an atmosphere, like a creepiness to them.
And this one did, I think, a great job of building up the atmosphere over time. It feels really sort of like oppressive, and every time he goes and messes with the teleporter, you start feeling more and more uneasy.
You just feel the tension building up. Yeah, that's definitely an important thing if you want to do a movie like this. It's also a more stylish movie than the 1958 one.
Yes.
It feels a lot more polished, which maybe is because it came out in the 80s, It's definitely got that 80s-ness to it, which I'll probably talk about.
Yeah.
Maybe a little more later. So, are we just giving every category to the 80s one?
Maybe it'll even out at some point. We'll see.
How many categories
but
have we done?
I do agree.
4, 5?
We've done 4 categories, and so I think we're gonna give this one to the 80s one as well.
Yeah, okay. Critical reception. Okay, this one's gonna be a little. I actually. Well, no, I think this one's gonna be a little easy to determine. Okay, so. If I remember right, I think I've read both of these movies were kind of they had some criticism when they were released, but they became regarded as classics later on. The 1958 movie has 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh wow! How many reviews?
Didn't look. I should have looked. Quite a few. It was quite a number of reviews. More than 20, I'm pretty sure.
Oh wow!
It has a 7.1 on IMDb. And it has a 3.5 on Letterboxd.
Huh.
So that's a decently regarded movie. It was not nominated for an Oscar, but it was nominated for a Hugo Award for Best Sci-Fi or Fantasy Movie.
Okay.
Although, what's weird is no winner was declared that year.
They can do that?
I don't know if they tied or what, but it's strange. There were only 2 other nominees. The other nominees were The Seventh Voyage of Sinbad.
Okay.
And the first Hammer Dracula movie.
It feels weird to just not pick a winner. Like, can you imagine that happening nowadays?
Yeah, with the Oscars, like, just...
Everyone would be so confused. Like, what do you mean no one gets the award?
Or imagine if, like, elections went like that. That'd be so strange.
Sorry, no president for the next 4 years.
Honestly, I would prefer that.
We've got 2 out of the 3 branches of the government working for him, and that ain't bad.
That ain't bad, yes. Oh, guts, yep. Oh, but that would mean it would be President Jack Nicholson then. So.
True.
Leonard Maltin.
Ooh, okay.
What do you want to guess he gave the 1958 movie?
I think he would have liked it. I'm gonna say a 3.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm in his head.
He called it an improbable but diverting sci-fi, end quote. And that's it. That's all he said.
Oh, that's all he had to say on it?
That's all I have to say about that. The 1986 movie has 93% on Rotten Tomatoes.
Okay. Little lower.
But the other 2 websites, it's not it's not a contest. It has a 7.6 on IMDb.
Okay.
And it has a 4 on Letterboxd, so that's higher than the 50s one. Leonard Maltin. Again. What do you want to guess he gave the 86 film?
I'm gonna guess he liked the 80s one less because it was too gross for him, and he gave it a 2.
No. Well, you were close. 2.5 out of 4 stars.
Okay.
But you were right about the reason he didn't like it.
I knew it.
He said that Goldblum is just right. Extremely intense, sharply written remake that unfortunately goes over the line to be gross and disgusting. End quote. A reminder, he gave John Carpenter's The Thing 1.5 stars.
Yeah.
The 1986 one did get high praise from Siskel and Ebert.
Oh, okay.
With Siskel including it on his top 10 movies of the year list.
Oh, wow.
Which is that's actually a pretty big deal, because he usually wasn't impressed with horror movies, so... Top 10 of the year for The Fly? That's something.
That's pretty impressive. What else was up there, do you know?
Oh, I have no idea. Probably Platoon. Platoon was 1986. They even said Goldblum deserved an Oscar nomination, which he did not get,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately. Although the movie did win an Oscar for Best Makeup. So this one won an Oscar, but the 50s one didn't. That's another thing worth pointing out.
Okay. Yeah.
Another thing that's interesting. So Vincent Price, who was in the 1958 movie, he actually saw the remake.
Oh.
He said that Jeff Goldblum had written a letter to him saying, "I hope you like it as much as I liked yours." And Vincent Price did indeed see the 1986 Fly film. He said he thought it was wonderful right up to a certain point. It went a little too far.
I think I could probably guess at what point Vincent Price checked out.
Yeah. Okay, so but I guess if you tally these up, I think that means the 80s one wins again.
That's what it's that's what it sounds like.
It was kind of close in some areas, but yeah, I think the 80s one wins again.
This is turning into a slaughter.
I think we still have like what 10 more categories though.
Yeah, the 50s one can still pop off. We'll see.
Music. Paul Sawtell did the music for the 1958 one.
Okay, did he do anything else?
I forgot to look. Let's see what else he did.
Oh, he did a lot.
I don't know that name, honestly. Oh, he did some music for the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes films. That's cool.
He did some for the Dick Tracy movies, I think.
Oh, Tarzan and the Leopard Woman, another movie directed by the same guy, and Tarzan and the Huntress, also directed by the same guy. So yeah, he's got. Oh my god, that's a lot. That's a lot of movies.
He's done a lot of Tarzan movies.
Kronos. He also did the music for Kronos, that movie I mentioned earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And The Story of Mankind, which also has Vincent Price in it, but it's not a very good movie. Actually, he's got quite a few Tarzan movies under his belt, it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, quite a lot of movies. Some I've never heard of. He did the music for Faster Pussycat Kill Kill. That's pretty funny. Russ Meyer movie. Okay. So he did the music for the 50s one, and I think it's a pretty good score.
Yeah.
Very dramatic.
I thought that the main theme, like during like the opening credits, was pretty good.
Yeah.
It does a really good job of setting the mood. It's not there all the time, but I do kind of like that because then it lets, like, during those suspenseful scenes, it makes it feel a little bit more stressful with there being no music because you're like on edge waiting for, like, the music sting to kick in with, like, the scare.
And then also, like, it gives weight to, like, the emotional moments, like, as well, like the sadder moments. I also like how during the opening credits we hear fly sound effects. That's kind of fun.
Yeah.
It's a good score, I think. It works for the movie. The music for the 86 one was done by Howard Shore.
And he's done a couple of pretty big movies.
Including some other Cronenberg movies. I think he also did music for Dead Ringers, if I remember right.
He did music for Ed Wood.
And he also, but his most famous score, he did the music for the Lord of the Rings trilogy.
Yep. And for the Hobbit trilogy.
And his score for this movie is very dramatic.
Yes.
During the opening was it just me? The opening credits, the music almost sounded like Wagner.
It kind of did.
It had this, like, operatic, like, kind of classical sound to it. I thought.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, the music, I think, again, it does its job during the more intense moments. And it was also it was definitely going for a more like romantic and somber tone during some parts.
Yeah,
which again fits the movie. You do also hear saxophones because it's an 80s score.
Of course.
And there's dated 80s music playing in the bar scene, so there's that as well. This was one of the ones where I actually wasn't sure who to give it to. Because I like both scores. I like both of them.
Yeah, no, both scores are very good. And that's another thing that I feel like we need to preface, especially with kind of the slaughter that this has been so far. These are both very good movies.
I liked both of them, yeah, when I watched them.
I do, like I said, I do appreciate the 50s one giving its music time to breathe as well, so it's not like constant, but the songs that are in there are very good. I'm kind of leaning the 50s. It also feels slightly more timeless than the 80s, because you're right, the 80s one, it does have a lot of those.
Yeah. But they're both good.
Sort of like you can tell.
They are both.
Yeah, they're both very good.
They're both very good scores, though. But yeah, I'm gonna. Also, it's kind of just we kind of want to give the 50s one a chance too. So.
we have to give it some acknowledgement.
We gotta throw it a bone. I mean, because it's definitely
this next.
It's not winning this next category.
No.
Okay, so the next category.
All right, category 7, visual effects.
Although, to be fair, okay, the 58 one actually has okay special effects for the time.
Yeah. Especially with, like, the tiny budget it had.
The fly costume is actually pretty good, especially the head. It's just a big fly head, yeah.
Yeah. And he's got like a little fly arm that's like a claw at the end.
Yeah, it does look a little bit goofy, but I mean that's kind of to be expected when it's a movie about a guy that turns into a fly. The 58 one also, I forgot about it. The beginning is actually kind of bloody.
Yeah.
You don't see it, but like the aftermath, they find Andre's body like crushed and there's like blood.
Yeah, you could tell that he stuck his head and his arm into the hydraulic press. There's just blood everywhere.
Maybe that's why they filmed it in color. Anyway. And I also like the effects on the transporter machine.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff in the lab looks really nice because they have like neon lights everywhere.
It kind of looked like an Atari game or something.
It kind of did.
But yeah, it's a fun set too, if we're counting set design under special effects. And there's also a really cool effect where you see from the point of view of the fly.
Yep.
Because there's like multiple images of his wife screaming, so it's like you're looking through a fly's eye, which has like multiple images of the same thing. I bet that scared the hell out of people in 1958.
Oh, it had to. Because they revealed the fly head, and suddenly you're seeing it through, like you're seeing what the fly is seeing, and that had to be a little, ooh.
It's actually a pretty good effect, I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
And then there's also the effect of the human head on the fly body getting killed by a spider, which...
Oh. That one, I was not prepared for that one at the end of the movie. The whole help me scene.
It doesn't look that it doesn't look that convincing now, but it is a pretty eerie scene.
Yeah, no, because I was like laughing at first when it was like all like zoomed out. You're hearing the really high pitched help me," and then like it kind of zoomed in on like his face makeup. He looks genuinely horrified, and then it's a close up of this spider coming to eat him.
It's actually kind of disturbing, yeah.
I was like, "What is happening?"
And it's definitely one of the most memorable scenes from the 50s movie, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Unfortunately, it's going up against the 86 movie.
Oh boy, the '86 movie. Oh,
One thing that's worth pointing out, the 86 film won the Oscar for Best Makeup.
good.
And you
It
can see
deserved it.
why. And the guy that did the effects...
So I think we mentioned this...
The guy that did the
Yeah.
effects on this movie directed The Fly too.
Oh, cool.
And he was also the guy that helped do the effects on the face melting scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, that's pretty cool, actually.
Which, considering a guy's hand and foot melt in this movie, that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, actually.
So the 86 film, one thing that's worth pointing out with the 86 film is that it's gross.
Yeah, I mentioned this before we started recording, but I watched this. Yeah, I watched this before I was gonna cook myself some spaghetti. And I was like, oh no, I'm not hungry anymore.
I would not want to eat spaghetti after watching this movie.
And I want you to keep in mind, when we did the Thing podcast, when we were comparing the two Thing movies, I was like, the gore and effects in the Thing are awesome. It looks so cool. It looks so alien. This one, I was genuinely disgusted by just what this thing looked like.
I honestly found the Thing more disgusting than this movie. Like, the Thing is definitely...
Oh, no, I'm the other way around.
Because I remember the first time I saw that defibrillator scene, that actually gave me a nightmare.
Oh yeah, no, that defibrillator scene like scared the hell out of me the first time I saw it.
And the stuff with the dogs, like, jeez, you know. Whereas for me, the worst scene in this movie for me is the scene with the baboon.
Really?
I honestly kind of hate that scene. It's like just... I remember the first time I saw that part, I just like, oh my god. Just... Because he tests basically what happens is he tests in The Fly. He tested the machine on a baboon. You know, it's a matter transporter. He's trying to,
Yeah.
you know, and it ends up turning the baboon inside out. It's just all bloody and like it's so gross. Like,
no, for me the most disgusting scene is at the end when he's going through the final transformation.
That part's also
and,
pretty gross. Yeah.
Gina Davis rips his jaw off, and then you see his eyes like ooze out of their sockets, and then like no, I was feeling ill after that. I was like, oh, I do not feel good anymore.
Well, the Thing is definitely gorier.
Yeah,
but I guess this one's just more.
The Thing is gorier.
The Thing is more okay. I think this is the distinction. Okay, here. The Thing is more disturbing. This one's more just gross.
Yeah.
I think that's what, yeah.
I also I don't like bugs.
Oh,
so watching this was a little gross.
You know what? Yeah, I can, yeah. If I had known that, I might not have suggested doing this on the podcast. Because
no, I still love both of these movies. I'm glad I watched them, but it was gross.
Yeah, because if somebody... I was actually emailing my sister, like, yesterday. I was, like, saying, oh, I'm, like, doing a podcast on The Fly, and she didn't really know much about it. And then I remember, oh... She doesn't like bugs either, so she would probably hate this movie. But getting into... Sorry, we got off track, but the makeup effects in this are really, really well done, because basically it's showing him slowly morphing into a fly over the course of the movie. And it does actually look like his body is just slowly changing and becoming less human over the course of the movie.
Like he gets like these cuts on his back early on, and then you start to see like little fly hairs poking out of him. His face looks like it's starting to rot. He starts to swell up. It's so grody.
The part with the fingernails, jeez.
That fingernail scene was so hard to watch.
I know, yeah. Or the one you mentioned earlier when she tears his jaw off, that part, I was like, yuck.
And it's so sudden, because they're having an argument, and you're not expecting that his jaw's just gonna come off.
If I remember right, there were like some parts where Gina Davis didn't know what was gonna happen. Like the part where his ears fall off.
Oh.
She didn't know that was gonna happen beforehand, so she was like actually shocked when they were filming that part. Yeah, it's really, really good makeup.
Yeah, some of the stuff that isn't the Fly is also pretty gross. Like he gets Jeff Goldblum gets in like an arm wrestling competition with this one guy, and he like breaks his bone and it comes out of the skin. Then there's when he like vomits onto John Getz's character, and it melts his hand and part of his foot.
It's a really gross movie, especially if you, because
disgusting.
I guess another part of it is I'd seen the movie before, so I knew what was gonna happen.
Yeah.
But when I first saw it, yeah, there were parts of it that I just, oh my god, like, again, especially the baboon scene, just like that. That for me is like the power. Correct. I don't know. There's also parts where he kind of looks like Michael Jackson as a zombie from the Thriller music video.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
They did a really good job making him not look like Jeff Goldblum, because he just looks less and less like Jeff Goldblum as the movie goes.
I will say, at the beginning when he has that mullet, that's a pretty good hairdo for him.
Oh my god, yeah, the 80s hair in this. There were things like that kind of took me out of the movie, I'll be honest. You know, like that part, and like the...
Oh, when he pulls out like his cell phone, and it's like the massive blocky one that you have to pull the antenna out of.
But also with this one, you could tell there was just more money spent on it. Like,
yeah,
there's more extras, there's more sets. Like the matter transporter, I think, looks really good in this, and the computer and stuff. You know, his lab.
Here was.
Sorry.
Yeah.
What were you saying?
I was just gonna send this. This was my reaction watching the final Fly transformation sequence at the end of the movie.
Yeah, you had the same reaction John Getz had when his like hand melted off. Or was that his foot getting melted off?
I think that was his hand, because he was still standing up in that scene.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, if you didn't know what was going to happen beforehand, yeah, this would be a really just...
Yeah.
I can't even imagine what people in the 80s must have been like when they saw this up. But the 80s one wins this category easily. I mean, it's just like...
Oh, you know what makes sense? So there was another makeup artist that worked on the special effects for this movie. He had also worked on RoboCop.
Yeah, especially with the guys like the guy that got dunked in like toxic waste.
Yeah.
That makes sense, yeah. That makes a lot of sense, actually. But the 80s one wins this category, like, hands down. This one we don't even have to,
like... Yeah, there's no...
I feel
no
bad for
competition.
Because the 50s one did have pretty good effects for the time, but I mean, this one, it had more of them. They had more money to work with. And it was just so extensive.
The field of special effects had developed since then. Like, this is a movie that came out after Star Wars, so of course the special effects were going to look better.
And also just how extensive, like, the effects looked, where it had to show, like, just slow changes to this one guy throughout the movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a reason it won Best Makeup, you know. They're giving it to the 80s one again. It's, oh my.
Right, 6-1.
I might get a few points later, but who knows. The story.
Yeah.
The story. Okay. They both have the same story, and they also...
it's the same basic story.
But they also don't. Because they have the same basic idea of scientist tries to, like, make a transporter machine. He ends up turning into a fly, you know?
Yep.
But the way it happens is a little bit different, because in the 50s one, he gets his head and his arm switched with the fly. So you got a guy with a fly head and arm, and a fly with a dude's head and arm. It's kind of weird, especially at the end.
Yeah.
And it's told in a different way, too, because basically the whole movie
it's mostly told in flashback.
Basically what the movie is, it's Vincent Price being told what happened. And it starts with a good hook, too, because...
Yeah.
At the beginning, we know Andre was killed, but we don't know why. And it really makes you want to know, like, why did his wife kill him? Like, and then we get, like, flashbacks of Andre doing experiments. We see a few failed experiments, kind of like the 80s one, you know. I like the part where he puts, like, a plate in the matter transporter.
Yeah, and it has, like, the Made in Japan sticker on it, and then after he puts it through, he sees that it comes out backwards.
Yeah. And then the cat gets stuck inside the machine and doesn't come back, which... in the movie, the cat doesn't come back, but in the short story it's based on, you'll find out what happens to it.
Ooh, okay.
There's also a ballet scene that's thrown in there, because why not?
Because we needed to pad out, like, 5 minutes of this movie, apparently.
It does take over halfway into the movie for him to become a fly, so it is slow-paced.
Yeah.
There are parts that are kind of silly. I started laughing because I realized that a good chunk of this movie are his wife and son trying to catch a housefly.
Yeah. Like, there's a solid middle portion where he's, like, writing notes like, catch the damn fly, and then it's just two characters not able to catch the fly.
It is a little bit silly when you actually think about it. But then the stuff where he actually is, like, is a fly, you know, and, like, he's, like, just slowly going crazy, you know, there's some good stuff there. And he's, like, finding it harder and harder to communicate with his wife.
Yep. And it's actually interesting, because when he's communicating, he, like, types out this note on his typewriter at one point, where he says he's getting strange thoughts, which I thought would have been a really interesting thing to explore more. Because now he's, like, starting to think like a fly would.
Or it's like Taxi Driver, or Travis, like, says, I've got some bad ideas in my head.
And that this also raises another interesting question that I've been waiting to bring up here.
Yeah, what is that?
So, basically, what's happened with him is it's still Andre's mind. It's just he has a fly head and a fly arm.
Oh, but the head's got
does
switched.
That mean... Yeah. So does that mean that the fly we see at the end of the movie, it's a fly that's now starting to think like a human?
That's actually really disturbing to think about.
Yeah, no, the small fly with the human head, I think, is more disturbing than the dude with a fly's head.
Ending, that's another thing. The ending is very memorable, with, like, the human head fly basically just stuck in a web getting eaten by a spider. Like, it's actually kind of creepy. There's just something
Because
eerie
I
about
saw
the
that, I
way
started
he's
thinking,
like
I was like, oh, that's
high-
dark.
the high pitched like help me. It's just it's
Help
like oh
me.
good lord, very disturbing ending. For the 50s at least. And then the scenes with Helena and Andre, like they're actually really sad. You do actually feel bad for them and what's going on.
So I'll be honest about something. It is a dark ending. I thought it was gonna end in a very different way that was still dark.
Oh, what's that?
I thought they were going to trick Vincent Price to get in the machine with Andre, and then force them to do a switch. So now like Andre has Francois's head, but Francois is now stuck with the fly head.
That'd be so weird. I think I might be misremembering it, but I think the second one, Return of the Fly, I think that's the one where Vincent Price gets turned into a fly.
Oh, so that does have an interest.
Or wait. Or was it the sun? I don't know.
Okay, and just reading the thing, it looks like it's the sun.
Yeah, I think it was the sun. It's been a while since I've seen that movie, to be fair.
Yeah.
But yeah. What a missed opportunity. You know, like having Vincent Price turn into a fly. I mean, but anyway. Maybe that's why I gave it a low rating on Letterboxd. And then I didn't even bother watching Curse of the Fly because once I read that it's not even about flies, I was like, "Are you serious?" And I just refused to watch it because that sounded stupid.
Because it's like you just took away the whole purpose of it.
Why would you call it Curse of the Fly if it's not even about the okay. Yeah, so did you have anything else to say about the 50s movies story or
not really, no.
The 80s one is a bit different. So in this one, okay, one thing that's worth bringing up. So in the 50s one, it's like a married couple.
Yeah.
It's about a married couple. In the 80s one, instead of being married, basically their boyfriend and girlfriend, I guess.
Yep.
And it does focus more on the romance. And also the character names are different. That's another thing. Seth Brundle is the character in the 80s one. I just keep saying Jeff Goldblum because he's basically just playing Jeff Goldblum.
Because it's Jeff Goldblum, I mean.
You know, Jeff Goldblum falls in love with Gina Davis, which was, correct me if I'm wrong, I think happening in real life at that point. Let me look. Yes, actually.
Oh, okay.
They were in a few movies together, and then they started dating, because
it's just kind of what you do in Hollywood, I guess.
Transylvania 65000, The Fly, and Earth Girls Are Easy. They were in those 3 movies together.
Huh.
Such a strange selection of movies right there. Anyway. And the way the story unfolded in this one is that it slowly becomes more and more gross as it progresses, for one thing.
Yeah.
It's definitely more body horror than the 50s one.
Which is just kind of a result of having David Cronenberg on your team.
Because it's him, like, instead of the switching a few body parts with the fly, he basically gets, like
his DNA gets spliced, is how they explain it in the movie. So he is genetically part fly.
Yeah. So it's him slowly becoming a fly, which does open things up to more possibilities with the premise. So there's that.
Yeah.
Also, is it just me, or did the beginning of this movie feel like a romantic comedy?
It did a little bit, yeah.
Because the stuff with Jeff Goldblum and, like, Gina Davis, like they were just some of their scenes together, it just felt like a rom-com or something. You honestly could just re-edit this and make it a romantic comedy, probably.
Have it end just in the most disgusting way possible for a rom-com.
And then there's also some stuff that felt kind of out of place. There's a scene in a bar which felt very out of place.
Yeah. Because what they wanted to do was they wanted to show that he was becoming more and more animalistic and would start behaving more and more like a fly. But it just feels really jarring to just suddenly jump, oh, we're in a bar and Jeff Goldblum's beating up a guy.
He does arm wrestling at one point. Yeah, it was that entire section. It felt really unnecessary to the plot.
Yeah.
It just didn't really end up amounting to much. It also really dates the movie because it has that same pink lighting that bars usually have in 80s movies, and also the music.
Yeah.
That entire section, just the last few times I watched this, it always takes me out of the movie.
It is sort of a weird stain on an otherwise very good movie. Like, I think otherwise it's very well paced, but that one part just feels so out of place and wrong.
And to be fair, the 50s movie does have that weird out of nowhere ballet scene.
True, maybe there was a reference the whole time.
Oh, another thing that happens in the 80s one, there's a part where Gina Davis realizes she's pregnant and she wants an abortion since she thinks it'll be a fly baby. And there's even like a nightmare where she gives birth to a larva. Which that's a pretty disturbing.
Yeah. It is kind of grody to watch.
It is followed up on in the second one too, because it's about their son.
Oh, good.
Oh, and one of the doctors of that scene is actually David Cronenberg.
Oh, really?
He's the one with the glasses, I think. You don't see...
Oh, okay.
He's got like a mask on, so you don't see part of his face, but that's...
Yeah.
I will admit, okay... there was one part towards the end that I thought was kind of ridiculous, where Jeff Goldblum kind of just turned into a movie monster and he carried Gina Davis out of the hospital.
Yeah. He breaks her out of the abortion clinic and just jumps through a window head on.
It was kind of ridiculous. And then the ending just kind of didn't make sense, where he's like trying to put them in pods and it's just like, okay, but...
Because he basically tried to reconfigure the teleporters so that he would be able to put multiple people in and then just fuse them into a single person. And I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I did a little bit of math. So his whole goal is to fuse himself with Gina Davis and their child so that he can become more human and less fly.
But then you also have the part fly baby in there, so like, okay.
Yeah, so there's going to be a little bit more fly thrown in there. Well, the total human genome is about, I think it's 3 billion MB. The total in flies is like 640 million MB. So just ballparking some numbers, if we're assuming that Jeff Goldblum is about 1/4 fly in this movie, which is how the base pair math would work out, he would only go down to like 1/8 fly. Pretty much. Like, it was like just slightly above 1/8 flies.
But then he'd also be, okay, wait, so he's trying to combine himself with Gina Davis and John Getz? Or just Gina Davis?
Just Gina Davis and then their baby.
Okay. Oh, geez. So would it just turn out like that episode of SpongeBob where they're just like all combined together or something? That one. I'm trying to remember how that happened exactly. Anyway. Oh, boy. But yeah, it was a little bit weird. It was a weird ending. But the part where he dies, though. That was a pretty sad scene.
Yeah.
And then the movie just ends directly after. I was surprised at how abrupt it ended.
Yeah, no, like, Gina Davis shoots him in the head, and then it's over.
She, like, cries a bit, and yeah, then the movie ends. Yeah, it's the credits start. Yeah.
It is really sudden. It's just like, well, we wrapped up the plot. Time to go home.
It's like the beginning of the movie, it kind of feels like it's setting up things a little slowly, and then the ending is just so fast. It's weird. Okay, so what do you think? I'm kind of split on this one again.
I am too, because the 80s one also has a lot of interesting ideas.
It has more character development. It does.
And
it does more, but it also, like, as a result, there are a few kind of... It's not perfect, basically.
Yeah.
In the
but it does expand on some of the ideas that I really liked in the original. Like I mentioned, at one point he's saying that he's getting, like, strange thoughts, which are, like, kind of the fly thoughts breaking through. That's fully shown in this, because he starts, acting more and more like a fly.
Yeah, they take very different approaches. Like, the 50s one's definitely more of, like, a subtle approach to a lot of it.
Yeah.
Like, less is more kind of approach, whereas the 80s one really just, like, not as much as left to the imagination with things, So I don't know, actually.
It's a tough one.
And then the 50s one is also, like I mentioned again, it's like it's got that flashback structure as well. Whereas the 80s one is a lot more linear. The 80s one is just it's so weird comparing the first scene of the movie and the last scene of the movie of the 80s one.
Yeah.
Because the first scene is like
I'm kind of leaning. Yeah.
They meet at, like, a science convention, and then the last scene, she, like, shoots him dead. It's just like, oh my god. I don't know. Well, which way were you leaning, did you say?
I'm kind of leaning towards the 80s movie. I feel like it goes a bit more... It's a bit more creative with showing his descent into flydom.
That's a good point, actually. It shows yeah. But again, bigger budget helped.
Yeah.
The fact it was made in the 80s helped, because at that point, you're not dealing with, like, the ratings. Like, the Hays Code.
Yeah.
It's just, imagine what kind of shit they would have made in the 50s if the Hays Code didn't exist. But then at the same time, the 80s one also has that weird bar scene and, like, some other...
yeah, because it's still not perfect.
Neither of them are perfect movies. That's the thing. They're both good, but neither of them are perfect. But I think you made a good point that this one, like, shows more of him, like...
Yeah.
The fact that you see more of him, like, turning into a fly, it's not just... He just is a fly already, the gradual progression, it does make things a little more interesting. And then also the chemistry between... You see the full extent of, like, the relationship between Gina Davis and Jeff Goldblum. I think, the 80s one does get...
Yeah.
And this one, I feel bad for the 50s one, though. Well, it might win the next one, who knows. The next one's dialogue.
Ooh, yep.
The 50s one, it's 50s dialogue. So there are some corny lines in there. Although it's not as corny as the other 50s movie we did on the podcast.
Yeah, true. They weren't making World War II jokes as they were fighting the monster.
And also, like, the thing from Another World also had, like, that Howard Hawks, like, fast delivery, like, kind of snappy, like... It seemed like everybody's trying to talk over each other and stuff, So it felt a little bit more natural than that. most of the lines didn't really stand out to me. Although there's the "help me" scene,
that stands out for other reasons.
which was parodied in Beetlejuice. I don't know if you remember that.
I don't know if I do. Hold
Where
on.
like Beetlejuice like eats a fly, he like pulls it down, and it yells "help me." There's also a part where Vincent Price is saying that Andre would never experiment on animals, and he
Yeah.
says he would never harm a fly.
He also has kind of that thing they did with some 50s movies where they just have Vincent Price explaining to a little kid the moral of the movie,
Yeah.
which was a little weird.
That is another thing that happens in a lot of 50s movies. It's like they're very like they can be very preachy. Like this one doesn't have as many Cold War elements, but a lot of 50s B movies have like
Yeah.
you could clearly tell they're supposed to be like anti-communist and stuff, which is kind of just like for fuck's sake. I don't know if this counts as a line, but there are some very iconic screams in this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like when Helena first sees Andre as a fly. I mean, that's up there with like the screams and Psycho.
It's so memorable. They layered it like 15 times over itself.
True, yeah. It does take itself very seriously, but there is also some humor here and there to give it some levity. So yeah.
There are a few awkward lines in there as well, like when Andre's talking about the cat that basically just got vaporized. His line after he explains that is, "It'd be funny if life weren't so sacred."
Yeah. I actually felt kind of sad when he said that, but
Yeah.
But I mean, it's fine for what the movie's going for. The 86 one, I don't remember a ton of dialogue from it. Aside from the famous line, "Be afraid, be very afraid."
I remember the insect politics line.
Yeah, there's that. There was like one part where Jeff Goldblum was like saying his cabinet was like an
full of like
archaeological site or something. I don't remember the exact line. There's more F-bombs in the 1986 one, so there's that.
That's true.
Oh wait, I actually no, I do remember another line. So my favorite line is when Jeff Goldblum told the Imperial battleship to halt the flow of time. So obviously the 86 one wins just based on that. But no, I don't know with this one. This is kind of like I kind of want to give it to the 50s one just because of "help me."
I will say that the 80s dialogue, it's not...
It's okay.
It's hard to...
You don't
It's okay. It definitely helps cement their relationship, but...
People remember the 80s one because of, like, the effects and, like...
True.
It's because of the actors. That's what people remember, not the dialogue,
And you know what? I'll give the 50s a bit extra, a bit of extra credit here, because when Helena is talking to Andre when he's at the fly form, that is very interesting, because it's not really dialogue except when he's trying to like type on the typewriter or like scrawl something on the chalkboard, but it is very interesting because she's trying to use like a lot of simple questions to try and figure out what needs to be done and how to like move things forward and trying to reassure him, and he's trying whatever he can to communicate with her. It's not strictly dialogue in the traditional sense, but it is sort of
that's another thing I just realized about both these movies. Both of these movies, there's a section where the main character isn't talking at all.
True.
Which makes things a bit weird.
But I think
I don't think
I think
I don't think the dialogue was not like the main strength of either of these movies. I think we can agree on that.
No. I think I'll give it to 50s. So I think it carries that movie a little bit more than it did in the 80s one.
Part of it also is the 50s one was made during a time where you needed more exposition to explain things.
You know, actually, I will give it to 50s because I guess this kind of ties into the story a little bit more. But it deals with some pretty heavy themes. Like, one of the big ones is, like, you know, euthanasia or, like, you know, suicide, pretty much. Because that's what comes out with it.
That was
and so you have... Yeah.
That would have been a huge deal at the time, yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah. I think I'll give it to 50s, especially for that, because it's sort of dealing with those heavier topics, whereas
and
the
also,
80s ones were like...
It helps that a lot of these lines are being delivered by Vincent Price, so...
Yes.
Any dialogue is gonna sound great if Vincent Price is saying it, you know? But yeah. How many points does the 50s one have? Like, 2?
2 points versus 7.
It's better than nothing, yeah. Is that? Wait.
What was the score between
Thing from Another World,
movies?
I think, had like 1 or 2 points, right? It does have more points than the 89 Punisher did, though. The 89 Punisher, I think, only had like 1 point.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
And it only had that because of the box office. Well, 1.5. 1.5, because you said you enjoyed it the most out of the 3 movies. But we split that category because I said Warzone, but, you know, anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the 50s one, it has 2 points, so better than nothing. Okay, pacing/editing. One thing I wrote with the 50s one, the editing... I don't know if it was a glitch with my copy, but there were like a few jump cuts during this part where Vincent Price was walking across a room. I don't know if you noticed that.
I don't remember.
It was towards the beginning.
No, I don't think I remember.
It only happened once. No. Maybe it was just... Maybe my copy was, like, broken or something. I don't know.
It just, like, skipped or something.
It glitched. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. It kind of looked like it was glitching or something. But aside from that, though, the editing was fine. We want to talk about
editing in the 50s one. There's one really funny cut in the movie.
Oh, which part was that? I'm trying to remember.
At the beginning, when, like, the handyman sees... Andre's body crushed in the hydraulic press, he screams, and then it cuts to a phone ringing, which they overlay him screaming, so it looks like he's making the telephone noise.
Oh, so it's kind of like the House of Gucci with the...
Yeah, I forgot about that.
Where, like, Jared Leto, like, lets out, like, a car horn or something.
Yeah. I forgot about that.
Oh my god. Maybe that's where they got
It's the same thing.
But aside from that, I thought the editing was fine. It was, whatever. As for the pacing, it's a bit of a slow burn.
Yeah. Like you said, the fly creature doesn't even appear until like halfway through the movie. There's that weird ballet scene that's kind of just thrown in the middle.
Well, technically we don't see the fly face until an hour 14 minutes in.
True.
Because for a long portion of the movie, he's like covered... He has it covered with like a...
like a cloth, like a towel or something.
And we spend a lot of time getting to know Vincent Price, which, I mean, I'm not going to complain about that, because he's Vincent Price, but we don't actually see David Hedison for quite a while into the movie, which... He's the main character, so, you know. The pacing on the 80s one, that one's also... one's also a slow burn.
Yeah, it starts off slow, but like it picks up quite a bit once you get towards the end.
Once he's like doing the experiments and stuff, it's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. The only real break in the pace, like we mentioned before, is when he goes out to the bar and picks up that one woman.
So they both got a weird section of the movie that's kind of strange. And another difference is like there isn't like a big flashback thing in the 80s one.
Yeah.
And he's like, instead of he just turns into a fly, he's like slowly turning into a fly over the course of the movie, which does change the pacing quite a bit. So there's a lot more build up.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, it ends so fast.
Yeah. No, like once he's dead, that's it. Movie over.
It's like, okay. So yeah, they're both a bit strange in that regard.
I feel like the 80s one is paced just a little bit better than the 50s one. I was also surprised at just how short that movie was. I don't know why I was expecting it to be like 2 hours. It was only an hour and a half.
Both of them are about the same length, I think. Both of them, I think, are like 95 minutes. But the 50s one feels slower.
Yeah, I would agree.
So the 80s one definitely wins at pacing. Editing, I'm not sure. I guess the editing in the 80s one, I didn't really notice anything too weird about it.
Yeah.
Like, good editing, you usually just don't even notice. It, like, flows. If the movie flows well, you don't tend to notice anything odd. Again, the only odd thing was that weird bar scene, which kind of just... That's more a problem with, like, the structure of it than, like, the story structure than the editing. So, I think we're giving it to the 80s one, then.
It's just racking up the wins.
I don't think the 50s one has a chance of winning now. Is that right? I don't think it has a chance of winning now because there's 15 categories.
No. If it wins the last 5 categories, it could only reach 7 points.
Yeah, it's a washout then. That's too bad. The camera work. Now we get to talk about the camera work. The 1958 one is our first movie in CinemaScope, so there's that.
Hey!
So it's got a really nice widescreen presentation.
Yeah.
It's also in color.
Which, like we mentioned before, I was not expecting.
And it looks pretty good in color. The colors are very vibrant.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not Technicolor. It was a different process, but it looks good. The camera work, I thought it was fine. Towards the beginning, it kind of felt like they were just in a normal 50s house. And then as the movie went on, the lighting got darker and more dramatic.
Especially whenever they're down in the lab. Like we mentioned before, there's like all sorts of interesting stuff they're doing with like light and color in those scenes.
They did a good job shooting the lab in the movie.
Yep.
Most of it was wide shots, but there are some like dramatic zooms, like again when Patricia Owens is screaming and like the help me scene, yeah. So they do a good enough job with the camera work here. And then earlier I mentioned that shot from the point of view of the fly, which is a pretty creative shot there.
Yeah, especially for the 50s, that probably would have been pretty novel.
So it's not like overly stylistic, but there's a few things that set it apart. The 86 one, it looks like an 80s movie.
Yeah, very much. Very much so.
The camera does move around more in this one. There's more like pans, like camera pans. There's also some blue color tinting to it, I noticed.
Yeah.
Lots of close-ups. They were definitely trying more things here. Which again, maybe.
And then it would kind of go at a weird angle whenever Jeff Goldblum would start crawling on the walls and the ceiling.
Yeah. Because you gotta show him crawling on the wall, so yeah.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I don't know who did the camera work for this one. Oh yeah, he did like a um bunch of Cronenberg movies. Oh, he did some movies with. Oh no, he has been a main collaborator for several directors such as Wes Craven, Todd
Oh no.
Phillips.
Oh no.
Okay, are we gonna take away points if he did camera work for Joker 2?
Okay. It looks like he didn't do Joker 2. We're safe. I guess he's safe.
But he did do camera work for an even worse movie, though.
Which movie?
Freddy Got Fingered.
Oh. He did do camera work for Scary Movie 3.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not. Oh, he did do camera work for Scream.
He did camera work for Osmosis Jones.
And Dumb and Dumber. RoboCop 2.
Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
This is a really eclectic list, actually.
This is strange. You see, he did a lot of Cronenberg stuff, it looks like.
Yeah, okay, so he definitely knows what he's doing with camera work.
Yeah.
I don't know about the guy that did the 50s movie. What did he do? Carl Strassi.
Ooh, that is a name.
Oh my god, he's got quite... Okay, I haven't seen the whole list, but I mean, he did Sunrise and Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator and Limelight, so he's no slouch either.
He did the 1931 Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Gone with the Wind... Oh, Technicolor tests only, uncredited, okay. I was gonna say, if he did camera work for Gone with the Wind, I mean, that movie... You could say what you want about it, but, like, the camera work's really good.
He did Ben-Hur.
Kronos. You say Ben-Hur? Oh, the silent one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the 1925.
So, yeah, he's got quite a... Okay, he's got some pretty good credits under it. Oh, Island of Lost Souls. That was a adaptation of Island of Dr. Moreau, so yeah. I mean, whoever you give it to here, I don't think... Are people going to be mad if we give it to one over the other? But anyway.
Probably not.
We'll give it to the 50s one then. Just because, I mean, the poor thing doesn't have that many points anyway, so...
Because, again, it like, the camera styles for both movies really do work, you know, for the movies that they're in. Like, they're both very good. I will say the 50s one at least did try something new for the time with that, like, POV shot from The Fly.
That was another thing I was going to say. The 80s one, it kind of just didn't... Comparing it to other 80s movies, it just didn't stand out as much.
Yeah, it does kind of just look like an 80s movie. But,
because again, the thing that made The Fly stand out, the 80s one, was the effects, you know?
Yep.
The performances, so...
Guess we're giving that one to the 50s.
I guess.
3-8.
Just throwing it some... bones, I guess.
Because it's not winning the next category. I mean, come on.
Probably not, no. Okay, the next category is one of the most important categories, The Fly. And it's interesting how both of these movies have the same premise.
And two very different flies.
Yeah, because in the 1958 one, he gets his face switched with a fly, and then in the 86 one, he just slowly turns into a fly. So that's gonna lead to very different costume designs.
I mean, you could say the same thing about the Thing movies, because it's the same basic concept, but two very different monsters.
Yes. The first part of the 1958 movie is kind of funny because you see houseflies.
Yeah.
And someone keeps, like, trying to swat them, but then Helena, like, she, like, says, no, don't. You know, just, like, she wants them to find one with a white head, so...
Yeah.
You don't see the fly for a while. I liked the build up to it, though. Like, he where he, like, can't talk... so he gives his wife messages under the door.
Yep. That was a pretty clever way to do it.
And then his, like, head is covered. So you don't see what his face looks like. And first you see the fly hand. And then later you get the reveal of the head, which the reveal of the head I thought was really good.
Yeah. Because he has it completely covered with this towel, and then she just rips it off because she needs to see what it looks like. And then it's just a massive fly head staring her in the face.
I know, yeah. And it's a pretty good fly head for the 1950s. I mean, it looks like a fly head. One of my problems with a lot of 50s B movies is sometimes the creature doesn't look like what they say it is.
Yeah.
One of the more egregious ones is the giant claw, where they keep saying it looks like a battleship, but it doesn't look like a battleship. It looks like a weird, big, dumb bird. But here it actually looks like a fly, so yeah.
Yeah.
It's also in color a lot, so the colors on the fly look pretty good.
Yeah, because its fur is almost like a bluish, and then it has these green and yellow eyes.
Yeah. And again, it looks like a housefly, but huge. And then there's also the fly with the human head.
Which, that thing is creepy for other reasons.
It looks so weird. It's just
It does.
It doesn't really hold up to modern effects standards, but it is...
No.
Again, it is kind of creepy, though. I think just because of I think it's just because of how unnatural it looks, where it's a human head on a fly body, it's just...
with a human arm, too.
It almost looks like you like a surrealist, something some surrealist painter would come up with.
Or a German filmmaker in the 1920s.
Yeah. Or a Spanish filmmaker in the 1920s, because that kind of looks like something Louis Buñuel would do. But anyway, so it doesn't have that many effects. Oh, the fly point of view, does that count as a special effect?
Yeah, I count it as one.
That looked pretty good for the time. I don't know how they did it, but
yeah, that is actually a good point. That would be a hard shot to do.
They probably just held up a bunch of mirrors or something. I don't know, but it looked pretty good for the time. But the 86 one, it has, for one, more special effects in it.
Yeah. You get to see him slowly turning into this just horrific fly monster.
The makeup, again, very good makeup. And you get to see... You see more physical changes. At first, it just seems like Jeff Goldblum is just acting even weirder than usual. But then his skin, looks weird. He's, growing fly body parts on him, fly hairs, and his ears fall off, his skin starts looking weird. And
then by the end of
the last scene is really gross, because it's his skin...
It is so disgusting.
His skin falls off, and he's this gross combination of fly parts and flesh. He doesn't even look like Jeff Goldblum anymore by the end.
No. Oh, it's just so... I'm looking at a picture of it right now, and it is so grody looking. It has these big bulbous eyes, and he's hunched over, twitching.
And he also pukes on food to eat it, which is really gross.
Yeah, to dissolve it.
And crawls on the ceiling. I guess we're not. I guess this is kind of getting into special effects, but just
But I mean I feel like that is a big part of the fly, is how it looks.
But then also the effects, you just see more of the effects that this has on him.
Yeah.
the 50s one went for like the less is more approach, whereas the 80s one, like they really wanted to show you what it looked like. And they really did a good job of making it look like this is the actual progression of him turning into a fly, and also the progression of him just slowly losing his mind and acting more and more like a fly. I thought that was done really well. Like,
yeah.
The 80s one, sorry.
Yeah. No, this one was a bit of a wash for
What else do we have left? Okay, we got 3. Well, okay. The 50s one might win another category, so there's that. Overall enjoyment. I don't know if you want to start here or.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start here. So with the 50s,
this was your another thing that's worth pointing out. I'd seen these before and you hadn't, so...
Yes, this is my first time seeing both of these. So, I'll be honest, I didn't have a whole lot of high hopes for the 50s one. I thought it was going to be a kind of campy, sort of fun, cheesy 50s B movie. Which really wasn't what I got. It was a lot more serious than I was expecting, but it was also just a lot better than I was expecting. It was much more solidly made. So I will say I think it surpassed expectations much more than the 80s one did, because I was expecting the 80s one to be good. I had heard, all sorts of good things about that one. But at the end of the day, I think in terms of overall enjoyment, I think I would have to give it to the 80s one still. Just because it got much more of a reaction out of me than the 50s one did.
You're much more like, you were very repulsed by the 80s one from what it sounds like.
Yeah, it was so gross, but I couldn't look away at the same time. I think it's definitely the more memorable movie, and that's gonna stick with me for a while. But yeah, I think I just had just a little bit more fun and more enjoyment with the 80s one than I did the 50s.
But if you watch it again, you're probably not gonna watch it right before dinner time.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it at 2 p.m. or something.
But yeah, so my thoughts, again, I think the first time I saw the 50s one, I thought it was going to be like a black and white movie or something. But it wasn't. It was in color and stuff. And I actually think the 1958 movie is really good.
Yeah.
I think I kind of went in with similar expectations to you, where when I first saw it, I expected it to be a lot cornier than it was, but it surprisingly works at what it's going for. You actually feel bad for the characters.
Yeah.
The acting was good for the most part, and even for the time, the effects weren't too bad. And I kind of appreciated the less is more approach that it had. It wasn't just all out gory and stuff. It was a little more suspenseful. Yeah. And you can kind of see this. You kind of mentioned this earlier. You kind of see it as a movie about euthanasia a bit, which is kind of ahead of its time.
An interesting topic for a 50s movie to tackle.
I mean, it has Vincent Price in it, so it's got some pretty memorable scenes. You said the 80s one was pretty. I think the 50s one has some memorable scenes. Like the reveal of the fly, the help me scene. There's some good scenes here and there. The 1986 one, I also think is very good. Although it is very 80s.
Yes.
Though I think that's the thing that surprised me the most, is the one that feels more reflective of its time wasn't the 50s one, it was the 80s one.
Yeah, no, the 50s one does feel a little bit more timeless, which is fascinating to say about a 50s movie.
It has less, it has maybe some 50s sexism here and there, but for the most part it doesn't really feel as like it isn't as dated as some other 50s B movies are, so there's that. With the 1986 one though, I was like I was kind of rolling my eyes at some of the hair was ridiculous. There's that.
Yeah, no, that hair was a little silly.
I honestly think the scene in the bar is awful. That scene takes me out of the movie every time I watch it, and it's just like, oh my god, it kind of messes up the tone of the movie a bit for me, which maybe I'll talk about later. It's also, I think it's a good movie. It's not my favorite Cronenberg movie. Although it's one of his more popular ones, but I think there's other ones I like more. But its main strengths, like I mentioned before, Jeff Goldblum is very good in it. Honestly,
Yes.
Take Jeff Goldblum out of that movie, I probably wouldn't like it that much.
What if you replaced him with Vincent Price?
Oh, then I would definitely like it. But yeah, Jeff Goldblum's really good. He has good chemistry with Gina Davis. The makeup's good. You do feel really bad for them by the end of the movie. I don't think it's an amazing movie. I don't think it's perfect, but it's decent. It treats what could be a very dumb premise very seriously. And there's parts that are genuinely disturbing. That's another thing. This premise on paper, this could be really ridiculous, and they made something really disgusting and memorable out of it. So there's that.
Yes.
This might shock you, but I think I might slightly prefer the 1958 movie.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They're both good movies. But that one, for some reason, the way they approach the story, I think I just appreciated the subtler approach to it. The 1986 one does have the advantage of Jeff Goldblum. Actually, I might take that one back. Maybe I do prefer the 86 one. Oh, god damn it. It's hard to get past the fact that it has Jeff Goldblum in it. And like the scenes with the hairs on the back of his Then again, the 1958 one has Vincent Price. Okay, this is where I'm stuck. Okay, so let me put it this way. The 1958 one, I find it more fun to watch. But if you're talking about which one is more disturbing, then it's the 1986 one, absolutely. Because I mean, you know, the scene with the baboon.
I think if I'm just gonna throw in a few more thoughts into this mix to see
I was actually kind of undecided after going through these.
So with the 80s one, I think it also adds in a lot of smaller details that I think help it along the way. Like, for instance, one of the big focuses that they have during Jeff Goldblum's transformation to the Fly is his relationship with food. It's like the first time that we see him like eating or like drinking anything after he starts dumping in sugar, and then like when you see like you can see boxes of like donuts and a lot of other like sugary foods in his lab, and instead of like eating it outright, he basically starts vomiting onto it to like dissolve it and then consume it. It's just smaller details like that, or like when he's trying to shave and he cuts these hairs and it physically hurts him. It just a lot of these small details that I think add up for the movie as well. It's just things that are fun to catch.
You brought up food, and that just made me think, like, how did this movie feel as a person that loves food but hates bugs?
It was a little gross.
Yeah, that's the stuff where he's like puking to like eat his food. That like a fly. Yeah, that's so gross. But the 58 one does have some parts that are a bit eerie. I do like the help me scene,
Yeah.
But with the 86 one, I had to be careful when I watched the 86 one because like I made sure it was a couple hours before I ate dinner, I think. But yeah, it was like because I just oh boy. And it's weird because usually I prefer like the 80s horror remakes,
Yeah,
you know, of like 50s, like the Thing, you know, that's an obvious pick for me, you know, like the Thing. I definitely like the Thing more than Think for Another World, but this one I'm actually kind of conflicted. I give them pretty similar ratings, I think. I guess if I run through, okay, so they're kind of tied because the 50s one you got Vincent Price, 80s one has Jeff Goldblum in it. And then Jeff Goldblum's also shirtless for a good portion of the movie. That's always a positive, you know, like Jurassic Park, you know. And then I'm trying to. The effects are definitely better in the 80s one, that's for sure. The 50s one is told in a weird way where it's like flashbacks. But I think it works for what they were going for, though.
And it's not like that confusing to follow.
It does make the pacing of the beginning of it a bit weird, though. I think part of it is because when I watch the 80s Fly, there's always part of me that wants it to be a little... Not that it's a bad movie, but there's a part of me that, like, with a few changes, I feel like it could have been even better than it was. Because there's just something about... I don't know how to explain this, but there's something about it that, like... It's definitely a more effects-driven movie.
Yeah.
Than the 50s one. Maybe that's why I prefer, like, when a movie is more, like, character driven rather than, like, effects driven. Maybe that's where this is coming from. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
I could see that, yeah.
Maybe that's why. I don't know, but it's a toss-up. I'm like, just because again, because comparing the cast doesn't help me because I'm like conflicted between, you know, my two loves, Vincent Price and Jeff Goldblum. You know? Because when I got to the end of both of those movies, you know, I felt bad for all the characters in both of them. You know, like,
yeah.
The 80s one does have more character development in it, though. There's that. The 80s one just has more to it, I guess. But at the same time, it's also... The 80s one is a little more focused, I think. Since it's just 3 characters, whereas the 50s one, it's like, there's like a bunch of minor characters and stuff. I don't know. Do we just give this like half a point to the 50s one and half a point to the 80s one here or something?
I feel like that's fair. Because, I mean, I did... Like I mentioned, I think the 50s one...
They're both good.
Like,
I feel like more people know about the 80s one, so it's just like, at this point, I feel like people should...
like I mentioned, the 50s one, it exceeded my expectations by quite a bit, so I think it does reserve some recognition for that.
Maybe it's just the stress of the 80s one. It's just like, I'm just so stressed out that Jeff Goldblum is going through this. Just like, no, Jeff, no, not you. But anyway. But like, they're both movies that I would recommend if you're into like that kind of thing, you know?
Yeah.
If you're into like 50s, you know, B sci-fi horror stuff, then the 1958 movie's good. If you're into 80s horror movies, you'll probably like, and I feel like most people have seen the 80s one, right? I mean, that's a pretty famous movie, but yeah. Okay, so are we just gonna give it half a point then?
Yeah, split vote.
I thought it'd be more obvious after watching them again, I don't know. And I think they both have their strengths and their cons. So, I guess it's just kind of balanced out. So, okay. The tone. Is that what we're. Yeah.
Yep.
The 1958 one is very dramatic.
Yes. And I would say, I feel like the 50s one is a bit more consistent with its tone than the 86 one is.
It takes itself very seriously, and it's also really sad. Although there are a few moments of levity here and there, mostly with the kid.
Yeah.
Philippe. We haven't really mentioned him, but yeah. Although there are a few goofy parts, Like, there was one part where, like, Andre was mad while he had the fly head, and I thought that this is a little bit silly, I'm not gonna lie. Towards, like, the end. But I think tonally it was pretty consistent.
And I feel like the 80s one was also consistent, except for when it jumps into the bar scene.
Yes, that
because
scene...
then it changes tone so much. Because then he's trying to be like a badass, picking up women, beating up guys at the bar.
That's one of those. I mentioned this earlier, but that scene that might be another reason why I said I might like the 50s one more. Is just that scene in the bar really messed up the tone of the rest of the movie for me.
Yeah.
It became just so obvious that it's like this was an 80s movie, and it's just like it takes me out of the movie every time I watch it. But I would say for the most part, it's a pretty serious movie. Although Jeff Goldblum's eccentric performance does provide some laughs early on, because he's Jeff Goldblum. It's a surprisingly light-hearted movie during, like, the early parts of their relationship.
Yeah, no. Up until he starts becoming a fly, it's honestly pretty light. With most of the drama just coming between...
It's not until, like, the baboon scene when really things start to change.
Because early on, the big tension in the movie is just between Gina Davis and John Getz.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, with the... yeah. Because he keeps, like, making, like, like, sexual comments towards her, and it's just like, okay.
Yeah.
I would say both movies have a good tone, though, that I think fits their respective movies. Again, there's just maybe a few parts in both of them that are just kind of like, okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I think
also
I would
in the
give
50s
this one
one,
to
the 50s one also has that ballet scene that's kind of out of nowhere, to be fair.
But I feel like the ballet scene is shorter.
It is, yeah.
Than the bar scene. So I feel like I would give it to the 50s just because it's a little bit more consistent.
I know I keep harming, but I honestly think that bar scene is kind of awful. Like, I don't know if that's a popular or unpopular, but it's a part of the movie that I cannot take seriously. It just feels too cliche, too just it just feels too out of place in a movie that's, like, really disturbing. So, but are we giving it to the 50s one? Okay.
Yeah, I think we're giving it to the 50s.
They both end on a strong point, though, I would say.
Yeah.
The 50s one has the help me scene. The 80s one has a really sad scene where, Dan Davis shoots Jeff Goldblum, but yeah. When the tone works in both of them, I think it works. Okay, so accuracy to the source material is our next category.
Yep. And you will have to carry this one, because I do not know about the original story.
This is based on Kafka's The Metamorphosis. No, it isn't. Well, actually,
I mean, you could draw parallels to that story.
it's more the 80s one is kind of like the Metamorphosis, where it's like changing anyway. Okay. This is based on a 1957 short story that was originally published in Playboy magazine.
In Playboy, really?
Yeah, they used to publish short stories, actually. I don't know if they still do, but it was written by George Langlon. I don't know how that's pronounced. I think he's French.
That would make sense considering all the names in the first movie are like French.
Yeah, and like that's one thing that's worth pointing out. The 50s one, all the character names are like the same as in the movie. Andre, Philippe, Francois, Helena, And another one of George Langlon's stories was adapted as an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents, so there's that.
Oh, really?
From what I recall, it has been a while since I've read the short story. The 1958 one is pretty accurate to the short story. The names, again, like I mentioned, they're the same as in the movie. It's the same basic premise, scientist tests out matter transporter, gets his head and arm switched with a fly. Although there's a few differences. The ending of the short story was a little more dour. In the short story, Helena also commits suicide.
Oh, that's pretty dark.
And also in the original story, when Helena tells Andre to go through the matter transporter again, he ends up getting infused with the cat that had disappeared earlier. So that's where the cat went.
Huh, okay.
If you were wondering about the cat that disappeared in the movie. It doesn't have the famous ending with the fly in the web.
Okay.
It's just mentioned that the kid killed the fly and buried it with his father. So it's even more tragic than the movie in a way. So, another difference: the story takes place in France, while the movie takes place in Canada.
I feel like that was a pretty simple translation. They're just like, everybody's named something French, we'll just put them in Canada.
They're I think they mentioned that they're in Quebec or something, but anyway.
Yeah.
Most of what happens in the 1986 movie does not happen in the short story. It really just has the slightest resemblance.
Just the basic premise.
Yeah, so this is a very easy category to determine. The 1986 one, no, I'm kidding. The 1958 one. How many points did they end up with? I'm a little scared to ask.
All right, so this point goes to the 1950s one. So, the 1950s movie is in last place with 5.5 points.
Okay, that's not too bad.
Yep, and the 80s wins with 9.5.
I was worried the 50s one wouldn't. I was worried it'd get even less than that, but yeah. Okay.
I mean, the 80s had the first 5 in a row down. That's hard to come back from.
So basically, it's watch the 80s one, but you should still see the 50s one if you want.
Yeah, no, don't be discouraged by these numbers. The 50s movie is honestly really good, too.
I honestly, like I said earlier, I was having trouble deciding which of these two. But the 80s one does feel like a more complete movie. It feels like a more complete story. Which maybe is because the 50s one was based on a short story, so it had to come up with, but again, I like both of them as hell. Jeff Goldblum liked both movies, so
yeah,
there you go. At least I assume he did. I don't know if he liked the 80s one or not, but he liked the 50s one. So, yeah, that was... So it wasn't quite as much of a... At least it wasn't as lopsided as the last one was.
Yeah. Yeah, no. It was much more balanced than the Thing episode.
I think the Thing won 13 categories, and Thing from Another World won 2 categories.
That sounds about right.
That was a washout. Like,
well, I got congratulations to Cronenberg and to
did you say Cronenberg or?
Yes, I did. Congratulations to Cronenberg and to Jeff Goldblum for the 1986 The Fly.
Yeah. Hey, Vincent Price did his best, and so did David Hedison. We said Vincent Price's name way more times than David Hedison's name, and he was the main character.
I mean, it's because it's Vincent Price. How are you not gonna mention Vincent Price?
Yeah.
Anyway.
If I weren't worried about copyright, I would just include the Thriller laugh somewhere in here. Yeah. So yeah, our next podcast is
a movie even scarier than The Fly, even more disgusting than The Fly.
The most unpredictable choice we could have gone with, by the way. I don't... The SpongeBob SquarePants movie from 2004.
Yay! I'm so excited to watch.
I don't think anybody was expecting me to say that. And no, that is not a joke. That is seriously what we're doing next. Look, this was his idea, not mine.
and we will see you with that.
I just wanted to do a bunch of James Bond movies, and then we got sidetracked. So.
Only slightly. We went off into The Fly and then into a children's cartoon. Not too far off track.
You know what? To be fair, SpongeBob is a good palate cleanser after how gross the 80s Fly was. So
that is true. I gotta watch a movie where they drive around a sandwich instead, so.
Yeah, okay. It's been a while since I'm trying to remember when I last saw this one. Anyway. Let me see if I could find a copy of it somewhere.
I think it's on HBO Max, if you have that at all.
I don't have HBO Max. Wait. I might have to pirate this one. I think I saw it on the Internet Archive, so I might go there.
Dude, there's a ton that's on the Internet Archives right now.
Yeah, they have all of the James Bond movies, although not all of them are in English, as I found out.
Yeah.
No Time to Die and Spectre are not in English.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service was in Hindi, I'm pretty sure.
It was in Hindi. But yeah, and then after we do SpongeBob, we'll get back to doing Bond movies, which...
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to the next 3 Bond movies, actually.
Oh, so am I, because we gotta end it with Casino Royale.
Casino Royale, yeah.
Alright, well, until next time, Goofy Goobers. Andy Griffith.
Goofy Goobers.
Good night, you stupid idiot. Good night, you miserable slob.